I know some of you have already read the book and others I want to read the book, so I can't talk about the book a lot. I'm going to talk about the town and around the way of life growing up here and some other things that will indirectly talk about the book. B.R. Wall, when he was a kid, he grew up here too, was born here just like me, grew up here, went to school here. He started a diary in 1884. And that diary is about 4 inches thick. He kept it the rest of his life, and we have a copy of it. And it captures some of the lifestyle or things that happen every day during his life, but it really was hard when you read it to get a total picture of what life was like. But it's a great resource to have. And then in 1895, he started the Grapevine Sun, which is probably the greatest resource of the history of this city that we have. We have a copy, one copy of the Grapevine Telegraph published in 1893. And it's so interesting to see the names of the businesses and what they were selling and what the price was, what people were doing. It had a statement in it. We thought the fire department was started in 1907. We celebrated 100 years in 2007. But there was an article in 93 in the Telegraph that said, the fire department's not practicing as much as they need to be doing. So we obviously had a fire department here long before we thought we had. And maybe we had a law. We didn't think we really had a law till we had a night watchman until 1907. But after Reconstruction or during Reconstruction, the Reconstructionist was really playing hell on our city and was really hard on Texas and the South. And some of the businessmen kind of formed a vigilante group, and they called themselves the Ku Klux Klan. And they were not a part of the national deal. The only exposure here, there's a minute in the city record in 23 where they gave a permit to the National Ku Klux Klan that marched down Main Street by candlelight. But the Ku Klux Klan were locally some businessmen here, and they pretty well was the law and order until 1907. But I tried to stay within my framework of my lifetime, which is only about a 14-year window in this book. I was tempted to go back and to say some things I knew, but I tried to stay away from that. We created the character book and also the history book, which are also great resources. We have a lot of knowledge about what happened at different times in our community, but there's a lot that's got lost. There are a lot of letters out there, if you can find them, that pieces things together. And I would suggest that each one of you sit down sometime on the computer and just write your thoughts about your childhood for your family, because somebody will read some of those someday and write another book, and it will help piece together what life was all about. Tom Brokaw said that the men and women that fought World War II were the greatest generation. So if that's true, the baby boomers, the kids of my generation, grew up in the best time of any kids ever in America. We were all pretty poor, but we were all in the same basket. We had to make do with what we had. We didn't have a lot. Our community was a rural farming community. When I was in high school, there were only 2,800 people here, and before that, they were less. But we were a rural farming community. We had a community. The center of the city was surrounded by the churches and the activities of the churches and the schools. We didn't get electricity till about 1910, and we didn't get sewer till about 1923. When I was a kid, they were outhouses and a lot of the yards still standing. You could still see the flues where the old wood stoves were in the kitchen. Everybody had a gas stove. We had electricity, but we didn't have any appliances, if you'll remember. We just had lights, which was a great invention because the people that founded this community on when the moon wasn't bright, the only light they had at night was candles that they made from um, wax from cattle that were slaughtered, and they always ran out of that. So they were limited what they could do after dark. It was very dark. And you know, when I graduated from high school in 1960, a lot of the rural area did not have electricity. We still sold a lot of wash pots, a lot of wood stoves. We sold a lot of horse collars, a lot of gopher traps. REA was the company that served the rural area, and there were some places that had electricity, but a lot didn't have electricity. They didn't have indoor plumbing that late. So, you know, after the war, well, we got all of these appliances. We went from this great transition. So I wanted to write a book because it was a way of life that was gone forever. And I limited myself when I named it my Barefoot Days. It took, like I say, only about a 14-year period. And I wanted to write a book that kids, the millenniums, could read, the baby boomers could read. I didn't want it to be controversial. I didn't want anybody to challenge me on anything. So I tried not to put anything in the book that I did not have firsthand knowledge of or I couldn't defend, which eliminated a lot of things. For example, the word around town was that Mayor Lowe, who worked at the Rexall drugstore, he was my neighbor. He always drove a Studebaker car. And we had a lot of stills that were in the outlying area back when I was a kid. You could smell them in the wintertime. I got Cotton Thompson to tell me where they all were and the names of the people. And it sat on my church pew in my office for years. And when I moved, I can't find it. But I hope it's got to be somewhere. We didn't want to talk about it too much because those people still have family members here. But the word was that Mayor Law on Friday afternoon would take the back seat out of the Studebaker car and fill it up with fruit jars of white Lackman and take it to Wichita Falls and sell. Well, I knew Mr. Law. He was a great friend of mine. He lived across the street. I never saw that, so I didn't put things like that in the book. It was too controversial. I didn't talk about the Ku Klux Klan. I didn't talk a lot about guns. I talked about my BB gun. There were some things that I just forgot. People keep telling me when that's read the book of things that happened in their lifetime. And I think, well, you know, I did that too, but I forgot about it. My dad made me a pair of stilts, and I walked on those stilts a long time. I really liked them. And I forgot all about that. Ronnie Jordan said he went to the circus and he made him a whip and got him some cardboard boxes and played like he was a lion tamer. Well, I did that too. I made me a whip out of a sash card and frayed the end and wired it to a stick and it would pop. I did that. We used to jump the water puddles in the street when it rained to see who could jump the feathers without splashing and getting wet. So I didn't expect people to have that kind of reaction to it, to relive their own childhood. But it's been interesting that they have done that, and a lot of them have told me. I got a very nice letter from Dr. Kilgus. Y'all know Dr. Kilgus, who was a pediatrician here. He grew up north, and he said that he raised rabbits and he raised pigeons, homer pigeons, and he said that his pigeons would go down to the courthouse and bring some friends back home. Got him in trouble with his neighbors all the time. And he said he had an older cousin, and he had to, he always had to wear the hand-me-downs from his older cousin. And he finally got to the point one day he told his mother that he would like to have a new shirt. Well, then my mother made her own clothes. She made my shirts. And they used to make things during the war out of flour sacks. And they came in different sizes, and you had to get enough flour sacks to make an apron or to make a shirt or whatever. And a lot of people bought bigger bags of flour so they would get more material. But my mother made all of my shirts, and the pictures, you look back, you can tell because the collars would go out to about the end of my shoulders. And I said in the book, I know I broke my mother's heart the day I told her I'd like to have a store-bought shirt, and I did because she never made another one. But people are reacting like that, which I think is good. I didn't expect the book to sell anywhere except locally. I didn't expect to make any money out of it. I spent $6,000 to go with Durant's. I was advised just to do it with Amazon and do it myself. But Durant was the oldest publisher in the United States, and they distribute things worldwide, and they left it to me the right to allow Amazon to publish the book too. So I went with them because I thought they'd do me a good job, and I got Susan Pittman to edit it for me because I learned when we were writing the character book, every time an English teacher on the team would read it, they would make all kinds of punctuation changes and capitalization. And then another English teacher would read it and change them back. They like to wore me out. So I knew I had to have it edited, and I got her to do it. And she did make a lot of changes. And she said, but you've got a writing style that's unique, and I didn't change that. But I saw what she was saying. You know, I write as a lawyer, I write to speak, and I write for persuasion. My sentences were too long. I repeated too many things. So I had to rewrite it and temper that down a little bit because I knew that was going to agitate people. So that took some time. And I got it to Durant's. They were supposed to edit it, and they sent it back to me. And like I say, the manuscript's about an inch and 3/4 long. I thought the book was too long because I was going through reams of paper and I didn't know what size the book would. So I cut some things out thinking it was too long. But they were supposed to edit it, and they sent it back to me. And I didn't want to read it again because I thought they edited, but I started reading it anyway, and I found a couple of hundred errors. So what they had done, they spell checked it. They didn't proofread it, they spell checked it. So I had to go through it again and get all those errors out. And I sent it back and approved it to go to print the author's copy of it. And the author came back, the author copy, and I thought, well, you know, this is done now. I've finally reached a milestone, and I started reading it. And what they did, rather than retype it, to put it into print, you know what they did? They scanned it. Have you ever scanned a document? It doesn't scan every word perfect. I had 148 errors. And I said to them, they said, oh, well, you know, that's the way books, they're in all books now. And I thought, no, I've never seen a book with that many errors in it. I can't publish a book with that many errors. So we were way past due. But I had to say, no, we've got to send it back and get those errors. And I had to pull my lawyer card because they wanted to charge me more money. And I pointed out to them where they agreed to edit the book, and they failed. So they didn't charge me. So we finally got it to that point. I accomplished my purpose, I think. It's copyrighted. It's in the Library of Congress. It's in the Grapevine Library. Durant's has done a good job, I think, of publishing it. You can buy it from Goodread, from PAL, from Barnes and Nobles, Target, Walmart. It's on a book club in Australia, and you can buy it in 100 languages. There's an international deal I saw it in French. So I don't think it's sold a lot. I don't think it will. If somebody up north, a critic, would read it and write a good commentary on it, the baby boomers would read it across this country, but that would just be luck if that happened. I didn't do it for that purpose or make money, and that's why we give my opportunity to get my money back from the publishing to the Friends of the Library to make some money to hopefully expand the local history division of the library. I have written probably 500 speeches, and in those speeches, I've created a lot of history, got a lot of research. We have all those files. I've written maybe 6 or 7, 8 poems, maybe that many country and western songs. I've given about 50 eulogies. I wrote about 15 gunfights. So someday somebody can take those manuscripts and maybe put something else together about the history of this city. But this book is only 14 years long. And it does really, I think when you read it, it goes a long way to tell about what life was here. Everybody had outhouses. There were barns, hay barns in town. The outbuildings weren't painted. There wasn't any traffic on the street. There was traffic on Main Street. In the farming area, the buildings weren't painted except the house. They weren't gravel streets. They were black dirt streets. And some of the streets even had grass in the middle between the tires. People came to town on Saturday to shop for the whole week and go to church on Sunday. They had drawings downtown. People visited. Stores stayed open to 9 o'clock. Of course, they closed on Sunday. But it was a way of life, and we had no toys. There weren't any electrical vehicles either. There was, in our backyard, there was I guess, I don't know what you call it. It was a brick deal that had a chimney and a wash pot in it where they could wash the clothes. And there had been water wells in the backyard that were always caving in. We were always having to fill them in again. And there were everybody had a garden. The lots were big. They were 1-car garages. People usually parked in them, but they used them as storage. The cotton fell off the trailers coming in the fall. The Maceros came. It was a great time when we had a harvest. And like I say, the church and the school was really the center of the life. And so I tried to capture that and try to stay away from the controversy of things. I also just eliminated some things that I just thought the book was too long. I talked about that's I want to call it a cistern, but it wasn't a cistern. It was a fire furnace where they burnt their trash. And the dad was planting a garden one year, and I was climbing on that chimney, and it came down, fell apart. Should have killed me. There was one piece that didn't fall apart. Most of it just hit me bricks. It knocked me away from it, but there was a piece about so big, if it had hit me, it had crushed me. It scared everybody to death. And the people had to burn their trash. They had to make do. My mother I remember her washing the clothes on a rub board. We sold a lot of rub boards, even up into the 60s in the hardware store. And during the war years, I didn't talk as much about it as I should have. We had rations, coupons they give out in the grocery store. Gasoline, sugar, coffee, and flour were all rationed. You had to have a coupon to be able to buy it. We have quite a few of those ration books left. They're a part of the archives of the city. But the women, worked really hard knitting. They had sewing circles. They knitted sweaters and socks and bandages, made bandages for the men in the war. I probably didn't talk enough about that as I should have. And as I got towards the end in junior high, I thought I was out of paper and out of time. I left some things out. I nearly got killed when I was in the 7th grade. We were playing in a tournament at Smithfield after the basketball season was over. And it was the first game that I really kind of came into my own, where I wasn't distracted by the crowd, and I made more points that game than I ever had before. I just finally became a basketball player, I guess. I was in the first seat of the bus, and going home, it was extremely foggy. You could not see hardly anything. And I was right behind the driver in that front seat, and all of a sudden, the bus came to a sudden stop, threw everybody into the floor, and the driver laid his head down on the steering wheel. And in a minute, you could hear the train. You could see the reflectors on the side of the cars. We were so close to it as they were going by. It was just a miracle that he heard something or saw something and stopped, because we could have all been killed, I guess. I nearly had a similar wreck. When I go to Walmart, it's so big, I like to drive those carts. And I was in there last week, and I had checked out, and I saw down at the end that the lady was checking receipts. So they give you the receipt with your change back, and it was in my pocket. So I looked down to get my receipt out so I could show her, and I looked up, and there was an old lady pushing a cart that had just stopped right in front of me. And I got within a foot of her. I thought, if I'd have hit her, I'd have killed her, I'm sure. So, life's full of challenges and full of opportunities for things to go wrong. We've all had those experiences in life. But I tried to capture the best of what we did. And looking back, and when you read the book, we did a lot of things to entertain ourselves, a lot of things. And so if you read it, you're going to reminisce on what you did yourself. You need to write that down, so people will have it for the future. And we're going to have to find a way to go back in time and capture more of the history of our community. I might not be able to get those books written. We are doing a lot of research now on the period of time millions of years ago when Grapevine was a seacoast town. We're meeting with the parole people next week. They have a whole floor of things that they don't really need, they want to get rid of. You would not believe what they have found at Grapevine Lake. They have the imprint of all kinds of leaves and vegetation. They have the tracks and rocks of crabs. They have the imprints of all kinds of prehistoric fish. They have a prehistoric turtle. There are 2 mastodons that are still covered up in Lake Grapevine that they haven't removed because they have no place to put them. They found the biggest bird dinosaur ever found in the world here. They found an amphibious dinosaur at DFW Airport when they built it. It's in storage, I think, in one of the terminals. We're going to try to see if we can get that somewhere. We have the dinosaur tracks that were in the creek that they cut out that went to SMU, and now they're not for sure where they are, but we have duplicates of them. And they found the jawbone a couple of months ago of a small dinosaur that's about the size of a collie dog. We have enough artifacts and information and research about what went on here that is going to be incredibly interesting to people if we can get it in a way that we can display it and show the maps of what the land looked like, what the water looked like. There was swamps, and there was deltas. They were big trees. There was a petrified tree washed up during the flood when we found the dinosaur tracks. That looked like it was a redwood tree. It was really probably that big around. And it was petrified. It was probably 30 foot long. It was petrified, but some of the bark was still real. It hadn't turned to stone. And we have a few pieces of that. I do not know what happened to that tree. But, these scientists, they make their money, they get their grants from writing papers. So everybody is secretive and don't want somebody that's a competitor to get the story and be able to raise more money. So it's really quite a culture. But there are a lot of really smart people and there's a lot of information out there. I think we've cast our past on the wine industry, but the dinosaur might be the biggest thing in the world. It may be equal to the Garden of Eden here, is what they found. It's just amazing. So we're working on that. We're meeting next week on that. We don't know a whole lot about the Indians, their lifestyle. We know that there's letters and information available that could be put together. We know that the chief was always in the center teepee, and the people that had the highest position in the tribe were the closest to the water in the woods. We know the Sioux had 4 teepees, one for the boys to sleep in, one for the girls, one to cook in, and one to store things in. We know the teepee was a magical architectural structure that could withstand the winds of the mid states and the plains. It vented the smoke. They could build a fire inside and it'd go out the top, and they would raise the bottoms in the morning in the summer to ventilate. We know a lot about them. I haven't seen a book where it really described the tribes. I figured out a lot, I think, about the Indians, and we found a lot of artifacts here. We know pretty well where their camps were, but I often wondered why Sam Houston called the peace treaty in August, the hottest month of the year. He knew it would be 100 degrees. There was a reason for that. His diary says he sent his Indian commissioner out into the bush to spread the word to meet at Bird's Fort at the time of the full moon in the month of August. But why the month of August? Well, I discovered that the Indian tribes had a tournament and a market in the early fall every year, where the 3 forks of the Trinity come together, or somewhere close. It was pretty well sponsored by the Caddos, and the Caddos wouldn't let any other Indians or anybody except a chief into their campground. So we know that it was on the edge of the Caddo Nation. We know there was a Caddo mound in Grapevine, where Northwest Highway, where the filling station is at Dove and Northwest Highway. The Corps of Engineers excavated that site and documented it. So that's the furthest east that we know of the Caddo Nation. But somewhere along the 3 forks of the Trinity, the Indians came together probably in late August or early September at the end of the harvest. They competed with one another on riding horses, shooting arrows, throwing lances, wrestling, all kinds of things. They had kind of an Olympic every year. And they traded wares. The Caddos, raised corn and beans and pumpkins and things. And in the fall, they would dry the corn and the beans and they would trade them. They also dealt with the French. And so they had the beads, they had the metal tools, they had the guns, and they also made a lot of bows. And they traded a lot of boat art bows, we know. The Pueblos had the silver and the turquoise and the beautiful pottery. And of course, the Comanches and the Apaches had the horses that they traded, the beaver skins and all of that. But they came together here near our area, probably just a little north of here, every time at the end of August or in the 1st of September. Houston had to know that the Indians were all going together here about that time. So that's why he called, I'm sure, the peace treaty in the month of August when it was so hot, which created a lot of problems. So it's so interesting to discover things like that. I hope somebody will write a book about our seacoast times and all of the dinosaurs, about the Indians, the way of life, like I wrote the book about Barefoot Days, and about the early settlers. You know, we know they made their own toys too. They slept on corn shuck mattresses. The men at night with candlelight would pull the seed out of the cotton so the wife could spin it into yarn and weave it into the cloth and make the clothes. We know a lot of things if it was just collected in a book where it would be readable. And so hopefully people will do that someday. If I live long enough, I might write another book. It's just, if it took that long to cover 14 years, it would be impossible to cover the other 70. When I was in law school, I wanted to write a romance novel, and I outlined it and I named the characters and I started writing it. I was going to call it My Love is Eternal. You know where I got that name? That's the words Abraham Lincoln had engraved in Mary Todd's wedding ring. My love is eternal. But after I got married, I thought I better abandon it. My wife was going to suspect that I wasn't making things up, that it was something that was real, that was going to cause me all kinds of problems. So I abandoned that. It's a major undertaking to write a book. I would like to write, you know, my greatest years were high school and college, and the years I hunted all over the world, and my 50-year career with the city. I learned at a very early age in politics that what people wanted was more for less, more city services for less money. And nobody had ever been able to do that for them. Not King Tut, not Julius Caesar, not Alexander the Great, not Napoleon. Nobody has ever been able to do that. They always give less for more because they burn it up conquering other armies or other countries, or they just wasted the money. But when I became mayor, our tax rate was 80 cents. Only 30% of the land was taxable. And today it's 25%. So it dropped nearly a penny every year, and we gave more back than what we collected from people. We gave them more for less. That's why I got reelected so many times. And people, I wanted to eliminate, we didn't pass our second 1 cent city sales tax like all the other cities did. I wanted to use that to eliminate ad valorem taxes in the city. And back about the time we had an opportunity to vote on the trains, we got to the position we could do that. But we talked about the feasibility of doing it, and the Wall Street people warned us that we shouldn't do that because by then the state of Texas had passed a law that gave the people the right to call a rollback election if you raise the taxes more in a given year, more than a very small amount. And they said if a tornado hits a Grapevine Mills Mall and the people roll back the taxes or won't let you raise them, then you're bankrupt. So we didn't do that. We went ahead and passed 3/8 of that cent for the train. And it bothers me because we're paying far more than Fort Worth. And we're paying $12 million a year for the train. Fort Worth's paying about $7 million. It won't go broke because we're paying enough money. If there's never a rider on it, it won't lose money. But we're paying more in our share, which bothers me. I made some comments about the airport on its 100th anniversary in the paper and in the newsletter. kind of upset the manager at the airport, I think. He didn't speak to Bruno when he passed him by the other day. But it's true, they needed us to make the airport work. And over the course of the years, they haven't invited us to be a part of any of the celebration. But they didn't invite Euless or Irving or Coppell either. They gave them 2/3 of their taxes. I didn't want to give them the taxes because we only get $5 million a year tax off the airport. We're paying $12 million for the train, which benefits the airport a lot more than it does the city of Grapevine. So there's a lot of things that still are unfair, but more for less. I think we're very fortunate. I think a lot of people have made more money in their houses in the last 5 years in Grapevine than they've made in their retirement fund in their entire life. So it's been a great success story here. Why? Because of the people. They work together. They volunteer in festivals. They volunteered at the hospital, at the library, and park and recreation. They've done a lot of things to make this community great. So it's got a great story. There's still a lot to be told. And the knowledge I think we now know is available if you just know how to find it. It's just not in a fine book that it's easy for people to read. B.R. Wall became mayor in 1912. In 1916, the city secretary last week found the minutes of a meeting in December. Does anybody know where that city council meeting would have been in 1916? All right, it would have been in the little white house across from the mill where the settlement to the city museum is. And at the end of the meeting, on the minutes, he said, Mayor Wall took the members of the council to see a movie. So does anybody know where he would have gone to take them to see a movie in 1916? The Palace Theater that we now have wasn't built until 1940. The former State Bank had the original Palace Theater in it from about 1924. But where would they gone to a movie in 1916? Anybody know?
I'm not telling.
Well, I know because my mother told me that she used to go to the Woodman of the Wall and they showed silent movies there. So I knew only through my mother where they were showing movies in 1916. The Woodman of the World. I have saved a lot of invitations, a lot of groundbreaking notices, a lot of ribbon cuttings, a lot of documentation because we haven't had those documents. And when you run across one from the past, it's really enlightening and valuable. Ms. Robinson had a scrapbook that lived in the house they moved to over on Dooley Street. And in that, she had a program for the opera house. I'd never heard of an opera house in Grapevine. And I found out where it was. It was right across from the Western Auto Store. I think it was in the same office building that maybe B.R. Wall had his law office at one time. But it wasn't a very big building, but they had plays there like the Runway, the End Players, and things like that. It's just all of that stuff has got lost. And Mattie Lou Bays came by my office today. I wrote in the book about when we were in the second or third grade, we made a Valentine box and all give everybody Valentines. She had a bag of those Valentines, about 40 of them in a little plastic bag. And she said she looked through it to make sure she got one from me. And she had two. I guess it was from the second and the third grade. One of them my mother had written on it. The third grade, I guess, I had written on it. But, I said, where did you get those? She said, I've saved them all these years. She said, I don't know what to do with them. I said, well, don't throw them away. They're really, pretty simple and and crude, but we give everybody in the class had to give everybody a Valentine, so everybody got the same number. Anyway, I've probably talked long enough. I'm going to stay around and sign any books that if anybody wants me to.
I just found out like a week ago that there's a creek up in the Bel Air edition of 114. There used to be a creek running right through there, and the foundations are terrible in that. But what kind of creek was it? It was built in through right by your town, on your street, William D. Tate, up there by where Chick-fil-A is and East Park.
Where Chick-fil-A is, used to be a rubber factory.
No, I mean, was there a creek?
Was there a creek
A
there?
creek?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you go down Ball Street, it dead ends in 114 now, but before you get to 114, that's where the crawdad holes were. There were one on the right and one on the left, and there was a creek through there. That's where we went crawdad fishing with a piece of rind from pork tied to a string where you go down there and catch those crawdads. And so, yeah, there was a creek through there.
So they built over it.
Yeah, it's covered up now. It's covered up now. There was a creek also that went through where the car dealerships were, where Willis Perkle used to live, and Mayor Perkle, where he had his dairy. There was a creek through there, and it started there where the car dealerships. If you cross Texan Trail and you look to the west, you will see the indentions of that creek. That is Grapevine Creek on the records of the state. The peace treaty was held on Terracara Creek or Grapevine Springs. And all of the evidence that I have that brings that's where the peace treaty was on Bobby Cruz's place down there. The information from the scout that was there, the diary from Sam Houston, the description of everything around it all meets up. But anyway, when I was growing up, I didn't even know that creek was, I didn't know it's a big creek. Just when it gets on the airport, it's as big as Denton Creek was. We never did fish there. I never did know it was there. It went through farming country. Others might have known, but that is Terracara Creek, and it's still there. We've got pictures of it, but anyway.
Was it a big culture clash when you went off to college?
What did I do?
When you went off to college, was there a big culture clash? Was it the big city, or were you adjusted?
Well, after the war, we got electric razors, we got hair dryers, we got electric washing machines, we got all kinds of electric toasters, all kinds of the electric devices we have now came from the war effort. Just like we got a lot of things from the space effort. Those little fleece shirt coats that we wear that are so light and so warm, the cell phone, the computer, and everything. I like to tell when I was in 1960 in Austin College, that German professor said, I'm working on a device to entertain the spaceman indefinitely, and it can't be any bigger than a coffee cup. And now we have the cell phone that'll just about do that, I think, and it's not as big as a coffee cup. So, after the war, all these houses were built, the Box Edition in Bel Air got built, we got all of these things, life changed. And I wrote about a lot of that, I think. It was good to see your mother not have to break her back rubbing clothes on a rub board. That first washing machine was pretty heavy and crude to move around, but it had a roller that electrically squeezed all the water out of the clothes to dry them. And I also it's just amazing what I keep learning from people calling me about the book. I got an email today that said that my grandfather, we had this big tree that I talked about that they gathered under the big tree and put a ladder across two chairs and put a sheet on it and dried corn. And then canned it. Well, she had to be wrong about that. I think they were drying black-eyed peas. And if they were drying corn, it had to be popcorn. You wouldn't dry corn and then can it. But, just things like that. I talked about my grandfather. I didn't say he was so conservative he ate the legs of the chickens. So, I had to pull some punches. I tried to write a book that was going to last for a while that was positive. So I hope you enjoy it if you read it. Thank you for, anyway.